So it's raining, it's a rotten day. It's not as cold as it is on the East Coast, thankfully. And I'm musing about a few things, and I posted a few more videos. So a question came up that was kind of interesting, and I don't have the answer, but maybe it'll start a conversation. Um, Classicism in ballet. Is the New York City Ballet, since that is the company in question these days, still a classical ballet company? But then what does classical mean? Does classical mean old? Does classical mean just Les Sylphie, Giselle, the romantic classical ballets? Balanchine's ballets were called neoclassical, which I presume means new classical, but he based them all firmly on classical technique, even the modern ones basically. Then there's the question of what is the New York City Ballet? Was it ever a classical company? Well, certainly that's what Lincoln Kirstein and Balanchine, who founded the company, that's what they wanted. They wanted American style, but based on the imperial classical Russian ballet, which was really French, because Petipa was French, and I think he didn't even want to learn Russian. He never spoke Russian, from what I gather. He maintained that French was the only language. Anyway, but so certainly the founding of the New York City Ballet was based on principles of a big classical company, albeit one that used American energy and American music sometimes. And certainly from the very beginning, both Lincoln and Balanchine wanted it to be an ethnically diverse company. Originally, Lincoln wanted half the dancers to be black and half to be white. And Balanchine, did the best he could, certainly with Arthur Mitchell breaking barriers right and left. But so back to the premise. The New York City Ballet, I believe, was founded to be a classical company. Balanchine, late in his life, gave an interview on French television, and my French was just good enough to keep up, where they asked him, was he a classical choreographer? And he said, of course he is. He said, because what's contemporary? What's modern? Tomorrow that'll already be old-fashioned, which I thought was a really good point. What's modern? I mean, tomorrow it's old, But if it's based on time-tested classical vocabulary, then you can say that even if they're doing modern music or modern choreography, it is still a classical company. So styles have changed a lot at the New York City Ballet. Balanchine left us 34 years ago. Peter Martins, who was a classical trained dancer, certainly with his background in the Royal Danish Ballet and phenomenal technique, beautiful, beautiful dancer. However, anyone, I'm not, there's no secret, the company is veering more and more and more to a more contemporary, eclectic style. The choice of musical scores, even when Balanchine did modern-ish ballets, it was still to classical music. But now there's a lot of new electronic, rap. I guess that's called keeping up with the times. And I'm not, this is not pejorative. I'm not saying this isn't good or bad. It's just a question. Is the New York City Ballet still going to be a classical company? The Balanchine classical ballets are being done a bit less than they used to be, but they take a certain kind of interpretive artist that I think the New York City Ballet still has. I've seen the company enough to know, and they have some phenomenal dancers in the company, but you can be a phenomenal technician and not be, in the old sense of the word, a ballerina, in a way, if you know what I mean. And again, I don't want this to be taken the wrong way, that I'm trashing the current generation. I'm not at all. I'm just bringing up the question. Is the way the company looked in the past now would be considered old-fashioned? Would it be considered classical? Could the company do both? I mean, I maintain they could do both. That's my opinion. They could do both the Balanchine ballets, the classical ones, Divertimento 15, etc. And they do, to a large degree, they do them beautifully. But everybody has been commenting how the music has been slower than in the past, which was one of the hallmarks of Balanchine. You could barely keep up, but it made it very exciting. So even if you were dancing an older fashioned ballet, it was thrilling because the music was so fast. And I'm not the only one. I mean, everybody's noticed the music is slower. Everybody now is finally talking about the lighting is much different. In Balanchine's day, it was very bright. He wanted basically a blue lighting plot that had a kind of mother of pearl effect on the skin, so it wasn't pink, it wasn't amber, it was not a flesh color. He wanted all the dancers to look like angels, which I thought was beautiful. And, you know, they use different follow spots now. They don't use the one from front of house as much as they use the overhead, which throws a shadow on the tutu, if it's a tutu, which causes shadows on the legs, which cuts the line. I mean, there's all kinds of little technical things I could go into that have changed. Now, these things look great in modern leotard and tights ballets, or, you know, very bizarre costumes, which seems New York City Ballet has been doing a lot more lately, where I know that that would never fly with Balanchine. When you cut the line of the body and when you don't make the ballerinas look beautiful, then forget it. You know, he said the audience has to come in and be entertained, but they also have to be uplifted. Ballet should be a higher form of human beings. It should represent an ideal, and it's not just a New York City Ballet, but ballet in general now. The women are thrown around, they're brutalized. Balanchine would never stand for something like that. And again, it doesn't have to just be Balanchine. You know, I sound like, you know, if it's not Balanchine, then forget it. But I like a lot of different styles of ballet, but it's just a question I wanted to bring up. Is classical ballet dead, as some writers have said? Did it die with Balanchine? God, I hope not. I don't think so. The audiences still respond. I hear the biggest ticket sales are all Balanchine programs, or all Robbins programs, so clearly, Anne Rotmansky is more of a classical choreographer than, I guess, most of the others right now. But he's been redoing a lot of the old Petipa ballet, so it's kind of, you know, he's kind of handcuffed himself in a way. I mean, that's his, he likes to do it, and it's fine, you know, and it's very interesting. It's historically very interesting. So, there's the question. If you veered too much away from the old-fashioned classical idea, is the company still a classical company? Certainly the New York City Ballet has veered away from the lighting plots that it used to look like and the costumes they used to have, and to a large degree the style has changed, which you know, it was Peter Martin's company for 30-some years. I mean, it's inevitable. And Balanchine did not want to leave a museum, but he also knew, and we all know, that different dancers dancing the same steps are going to look differently because they're different bodies out there, and different artistic sensibilities will bring their own to whatever role they're dancing, and that's great. I mean, that's how it keeps from becoming sterile and boring. You know, you see, who was it? I can't remember, but a choreographer said you see a different person, and I think it was Billy Forsythe. Yeah, it was Billy Forsythe who said, you know, Giselle will never get old because she'll have different dancers doing it. So in one sense it's old, like, you know, Mozart's old, and Picasso is old even, but ballet can't get that old because you have different live human beings doing it. So it was Billy Forsythe, I read recently, said that a ballet like Giselle can never really get old because you'll have new bodies doing it. So that's one thing. And then in the Balanchine repertory, he left so many different versions of different ballets, and when I stage them, I kind of pick and choose from his versions. I don't invent anything new, and I don't say, oh, that can maybe look a little better this way. To me, that's sacrilege, and you know that if you follow me. I just think that's crazy. But lately that's been happening a lot of places. They'll just change little things in Balanchine, thinking, oh, well, there's no story, it doesn't matter. And Balanchine himself changed so many things. What difference does it make? I think it makes a huge difference. And as I said, Balanchine left quite a few versions while he was alive for different dancers. So if it's a larger dancer in Serenade, I may opt for a few steps he changed for Karen van Aldingen. When she started doing the waltz, he changed a couple things because it suited her better. If it's a more petite dancer like Allegra Kent was, then I will go back to maybe a slightly earlier lift or something. But at least they're both Balanchine versions. I mean, and usually I will always stick with his last thoughts, even if that doesn't please the critics and if that doesn't please the dancers. It's not their ballet, it's Balanchine's ballet. So if he wanted to lop off the opening of Apollo, as much as that's gorgeous and beautiful and evocative, I always feel it's his right because it's his ballet, and I think you have to honor him. As far as costumes go, yes, Balanchine changed costumes a lot, like, for instance, with this Tchaikovsky Piano Concerto No. 2, which has another whole bunch of costumes. Although he didn't change them as much as some people think. A lot of things have happened since his death that people attribute to him that he had nothing to do with. So I don't mean to ramble, but it was just a question about, is the New York City Ballet still, quote, a classical company as it was envisioned by Balanchine and Kirstein and to a degree Robbins? That is a question because it's getting more and more contemporary. The programming is getting more contemporary. So it's going to be very interesting to see the future of that company. So I'm going to close this with a little clip, silent unfortunately, of Violette Verdy dancing a ballet he did for her La Source, which is a very classical, very old-fashioned work. But you'll see if that still interests you. I think it's still fascinating, and it can be danced like that today by the dancers they have in the company. They're perfectly capable of it. And again, I keep saying this, but I don't want any of my musings to reflect that I am critical of the current dancers. It's not their fault if things have been changed. They don't know. Most of them weren't born when Balanchine was alive, so how would they know? So I don't blame them. I just wish they had more input. Let's put it that way. All right, I will finish with La Source with Violette Verdy. Clifford out. Bye.